study room. This is your English tutor Nikita. So, are you all enjoying the chapters that we've done till now? And I hope you all are revising it too. Though the chapters look easy, they all have a little deep meaning attached to it and a moral that you all will actually learn and get inspired from. So, today we are on the chapter 7, A Visit to Cambridge. I'm sure all of you right now sitting must be thinking, oh my god, Cambridge University, how must it look? Even I want to go there. Some of them have already started practicing for it. So, this story is also about a person's visit to Cambridge. But this person is not you or me. It's a very different person. He's a different human. He's a different personality. And his story is full of struggles. But his dream and the way he describes Cambridge will make you fall in love with it again. So let's move to the author first and then to the story. About the author, Firdaus Kanga, born in 1960, is an Indian author who lives in London. His travel book, Heaven on Wheels, is where he shares his experiences in the UK, and this chapter is an excerpt from it. So the author, it's also again a personal thing that he's actually telling us his experience. It's the author's own experience. It's about Firdaus Kanga, and as you can see from the picture, he's disabled. We will know more about him in the story forward. So he was born in 1960. He's an Indian author but stays in London. So the travel book that he writes is Heaven on Wheels. Now you can know why wheels, because he's always on a wheelchair. So Heaven on Wheels, where he actually went to UK, and in that book he writes all his experiences. And this excerpt or chapter that we are reading is also from a part of it where he visits Cambridge. Now the theme in the story, or the summary you can say. So this story is an account of disability and the problems that come with it. Kanga himself is disabled. So when he gets chance to meet Stephen Hawking, he's elated to see a successful disabled person. So Stephen Hawking is also a very famous scientist and everything. So he was also disabled, right? So when Kanga, so he is disabled, as we all could see actually from the last picture. So when he gets a chance to meet Stephen Hawking, he's happy. Because, he's like, oh, so disabled people are also successful. It actually inspired him. Hawking makes a good point to show that disabled people are not brave or extraordinary for simply living their lives, and they would rather be treated with respect like normal people. This is what everybody says, right? Even if you meet any disabled person, any blind school if you visit to, the students will say, we are like you, don't ever sympathize with us or don't think that we are lower than you. We have some special talent, you have some. Even if we don't have a body part, it doesn't mean that we are less or you should treat us with sympathy or always give us extra priorities. Now let's begin the story. A visit to Cambridge. Cambridge was my metaphor for England. And it was strange that when I left it had become altogether something else because I had met Stephen Hawking there. So it said Cambridge was, so England is actually known by Cambridge University, right? So if you say Cambridge University, you're actually telling it as England. So he said, but when I left from there, the meaning changed overall because he met a great personality there. He met Stephen Hawking. It was on walking tour through Cambridge that the guide mentioned Stephen Hawking, poor man who is quite disabled now, though he is a worthy successor to Isaac Newton, whose chair he has at the university. So when he was actually doing the walking tour, the guy told him that this is the place where Stephen Hawking, the poor man who's actually disabled now, is a successor also. So, you know how people, even though you've achieved so much, still consider like, disabled man, God, like, come on, understand his talents, right? So this is the picture of Stephen Hawking. And I started because I had quite forgotten that this most brilliant and completely paralyzed astrophysicist, the author of A Brief History of Time, one of the biggest bestsellers ever, lived here. So when he goes there, he almost quite forgot that how brilliant he is. Even though being paralyzed, he was an astrophysicist, the author of A Brief History of Time, which was the big bestseller at that time. When the walking tour was done, I rushed to a phone booth and almost tearing the cord, so it could reach me outside, phoned Stephen Hawking's house. So there at Cambridge University, he was actually just rushing. He saw the chair and then it reminded him how the great personality was, and he immediately rushed to a phone booth and called him at his home. There was his assistant on the line, and I told him I had come in a wheelchair from India. Perhaps he thought that I had propelled myself all the way to write about my travels in Britain. I had to see Professor Hawking. Even 10 minutes would do. Half an hour, he said, from 3:30 to 4. So when he called him, the assistant picked up and he described. So it said that Firdaus said that Kanga said that I have come in wheelchair from all over from India to basically write about Britain. So I want to meet him. Even if 10 minutes, please can you do that? He said you can take 30. And suddenly I felt weak all over. Growing up disabled, you get fed up with people asking you to be brave, as if you have a courage account on which you're too lazy to draw a check. So, here we are actually getting to know about people who are disabled and the feelings that are in them, right? From teenage, from their childhood, we just keep saying, stay strong, stay strong. But do we ever realize that they don't have a special strong account, right? It's the same like us, how much strength we have. So he's again Kanga. The only thing that makes you stronger is seeing somebody like you, achieving something huge. Then you know how much is possible and you reach out further than you ever thought you could. So the only thing that makes all of us also strong is when you see the same person doing a lot more things and achieving except all chances. So when you and your benchmate are sitting together and you see him topping the class, you feel like, oh, this though I can also do. So that is when the courage comes in. So he says that is what is motivating you, not the storage account. I haven't been brave, said his disembodied computer voice the next afternoon. I have had no choice. Surely, I wanted to say, living creatively with the reality of his disintegrating body was a choice. But I kept quiet because I felt guilty every time I spoke to him, forcing him to respond. So this is about the conversation that he's having with Hawking. There he was, tapping at the little switch in his hand, trying to find the words on his computer with the only bit of movement left to him, his long, pale fingers. Every so often, his eyes would shut in frustrated exhaustion. So he's trying to explain the difficulty, but even the way he was actually just handling it, he was working on the computer, even though he was paralyzed. And sitting opposite him, I could feel his anguish, the mind buoyant with thoughts that come out in frozen phrases and sentences stiff as corpses. A lot of people seem to think that disabled people are chronically unhappy, I said. I know that's not true myself. Are you often laughing inside? So here, he's trying to create a conversation and he says that a lot of people think that, we disabled people are actually just unhappy all the time. And he says, I know, it's not true, right? We are often laughing inside. About 3 minutes later, he responded, I find it amusing when people patronize me. And do you find it annoying when someone like me comes and disturbs you in your work? So he's saying, but do you find it annoying that someone like you, someone who's disabled like you, is coming and disturbing your work? The answer flashed yes. Then he smiled his one-way smile and I knew, without being sentimental or silly, that I was looking at one of the most beautiful men in the world. A first glimpse of him is shocking because he's like a still photograph, as if all those pictures of him in magazines and newspapers have turned three-dimensional. So he asked and then he sarcastically said, yes, and he laughed. And that was the time he realized it's not the photograph, it's not the three-dimension, it's not the still photograph, he's a living man. Then you see the head twisted sideways into a slump, the torso shrunk inside the pale blue shirt, the wasted legs. You look at his eyes which can speak still, and they are something huge and urgent. It is hard to tell what, but you're shaken because you have seen something you never thought could be. So now he's trying to describe his personality, how he was sitting, how his clothes were, how he was managing. Before you, like a lantern whose walls are worn so thin, you glimpse only the light inside is the insandence of a man. The body, almost irrelevant, exists only like a case made of shadow, so that I, no believer in eternal souls, know what this is, what each of us is, everything else an accessory. So now he's trying to use all these English literary terms and trying to tell us that his body was not responding. He was paralyzed. But it felt like that was just a shadow. That's just an accessory. Because his soul was lit like a lantern. His smile flashed, which actually showed that body is just an accessory. It's not a need. What do you think is the best thing about being disabled? I had asked him earlier. And he said, I don't think there's anything good about being disabled. I said, you discover how much kindness there is in the world. Yes, he said. It was a disadvantage of his voice synthesizer that it could convey no inflection, no shades or tone. And I could not tell how enthusiastically he agreed with me. So he's saying that because of his paralyzed voice, you cannot actually know the tone and all, but his eyes were actually showing the enthusiasm that he agreed with me. Every time I shifted in my chair or turned my wrist to watch the time, I wanted to make every one of our 30 minutes count. I felt a huge relief and exhilaration in the possibilities of my body. How little it mattered then that I would never walk or even stand. So meeting him, seeing his struggle, seeing how much he's achieved, seeing how humble he realized that these 30 minutes are the most important time. And that I am nothing. I'm just crying that I'm disabled, but actually it didn't matter at all. You can actually do a lot. I told him how it had been an inspiration beyond cliche for me and surely for others. Did that thought help him? No, he said, and I thought how foolish I was to ask. When your body is a claustrophobic room and the walls are growing, so claustrophobic is when you're scared with hidden, like closed rooms, and the walls are growing narrower day by day, it doesn't do much good to know that there are people outside smiling with admiration to see you breathing still. So he's trying to tell why his answer was no. Because when your own body is just composed, it's just decaminated, you're just growing narrow every day, you do not know what is actually happening inside you. The people outside admiring or smiling does not make any difference. Is there any advice you can give to disabled people? Something that make their life better? They should concentrate on what they are good at. I think things like the disabled Olympics are a waste of time. So he actually asked me advice and then said you should concentrate on what you're good at. Disabled Olympics are a waste of time. I know what you mean. I remembered the years I had spent trying to play a Spanish guitar considerably larger than I was, and how gleefully I was unstringed it one night. The half hour was up. I think I've annoyed you enough, I said, grinning. Thank you for. So then he said that, yeah, even I remember how I was learning the Spanish guitar and everything. And then the half an hour time was up. So he said that, I think I've annoyed you enough, so I will leave. And he said, stay. I waited. Have some tea. I can show you the garden. The garden was as big as a park, but Stephen Hawking covered every inch, rumbling along his motorized wheelchair while I dodged to keep out of the way. We couldn't talk very much. The sun made him silent, the letters on the screen disappearing in the glare. An hour later, we were ready to leave. I didn't know what to do. I could not kiss him or cry. I touched his shoulder and wheeled out into the summer evening. I looked back. I knew he was waving, though he wasn't. Watching him, an embodiment of my bravest self, the one I was moving towards, the one I had believed in for so many years alone, I knew that my journey was over for now. The key terms: astrophysicist is scholar of astrophysics and studying stars, planets. Buoyant is intensely active and vibrant. Torso is your upper part of the body. Incandescence is inner glow or light. Accessories not essential but extra. Inflection is rise and wall of the voice. Cliche is a phrase or idea used to often to say that loses its meaning. It's so cliche, it's so boring. Claustrophobic, very small and suffocating. It's a phobia. Gleefully, very happily. Now let's discuss. Cambridge must be a metaphor for England. To the writer it meant Cambridge was a reputed university. England was famous for Cambridge. So England was famous for Cambridge, as I told you before. Every time he spoke to the scientist, the writer felt guilty because He didn't want the scientist to use his voice synthesizer. He knew how tough it was for him. I felt a huge relief in the possibilities of my body. The highlighted words refer to shifting in the wheelchair, standing up, walking, speaking or writing. Speaking or writing. Now questions. Did the prospect of meeting Stephen Hawking made the writer nervous? If so, why? Yes, it made him nervous because he was scared that what will I ask such a man? How will the things go? How will I go there? I'm disabled and everything. Did he at the same time feel very excited? If so, why? He was excited because he's going to meet a man who's exactly like him but has achieved so much and he would be motivated for that. Stephen Hawking said, I have had no choice. Does the writer think there was a choice? What was it? So he thinks that there is a choice. So when he says that I have had no choice and feeling sad about it or whatever, that he thinks there was a choice because, you could actually, when you go back to the story, you will realize that Stephen Hawking in all the times is giving a sarcastic answer. And he could have a choice because he's not here to inspire or get happy with people. He just wants to be happy doing the things that he likes. What endeared the scientist to the writer so that he said he was looking at one of the most beautiful men in the world. The smile, the flash, not a still photograph. If the lantern is the man's, what would its walls be? The body. What is housed within thin walls? It's basically being just suffocated in your small body. What general conclusion does the writer draw from this? That body is just an accessory. It's the light within you that matters. Now let's do a quick revision of the story and the inspiring talks that they both had. Firdaus Kanga, who is a disabled man and is the author, visits Cambridge when he realizes that Stephen Hawking was a chair at the university he was visiting. Kanga sets up a meeting with Hawking because the latter is someone he idolizes. Kanga and Hawking speak about life with disability. Hawking says that he would rather be treated like a normal person than be called for brave with living with disability. The author thinks Hawking is the most beautiful man in the world. Hawking talks about how disabled people must follow their personal interests instead of taking part in mass events like disabled Olympics. Later, Kanga and Hawking go for a walk in the garden where they soak the sun. When it's time to leave, Kanga simply touches Hawking's shoulder and leaves without a word because he's touched, he's inspired. So this was the chapter. Now let's move